What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the single player Let's Play. So I have to apologize. The audio is definitely a little bit messed up right now, but that's all right. The microphone audio should be okay. It's mostly issues that I'm having with the game audio right now. So next episode should be a little better, but I do apologize that the episode's late anyways. So this episode I want to get started with Applied Energistics, and it's a very cool mod that's definitely super duper handy, but I wanted to look into our options here for getting started. So to get started, we're going to want an energy acceptor, which is going to convert our RF energy into a form of energy that Applied Energistics can use. Now, it can also accept EU last time I checked, so that's definitely useful, but in order to get started with any of that, we want to get ourselves some quartz dust to make the quartz glass and to make silicone. So we're just going to go ahead and take some quartz and crush it up and wait for it to kind of finish up processing here. But this is going to open up a lot of opportunities for us for our storage, for automation, lots of crazy stuff here. So one of the other components of this crafting recipe is a fluix crystal, which is crafted by combining a charged Certus quartz, a nether quartz, and a piece of redstone in a pool of water. It's going to give you 2 of the fluix crystals. So let's go ahead and toss these things in and let them go. There you go, we get our fluix crystals. Now, you can further refine these by crushing them down, combining them with a piece of sand, and turning them into seeds, which you can then let soak in water to turn them into twice as many crystals as you started with. But we're going to get into that a little later. For now, there's our energy acceptor. Like I said, it's going to input RF and give us 8 channels that we can use to get started with a basic ME network. So next up, let's look into some of the other stuff that we're going to want to kind of get into in the starting stages. So to transmit power and network information, we're going to want to make these ME glass fiber cables. Or not glass fiber cables, that's applied industrial craft. These ME cables, and the ME cables are made with the quartz fibers, which are good for transmitting just power. And you combine those with a couple of the fluix crystals, and that's going to get you the plain, undyed, uncovered, non-smart cable. These are good for just getting started. So we're kind of starting to get a little bit low on charged Certus quartz, so let's look into the charger. This is going to take a couple of fluix and some iron, and it's going to help us convert normal Certus quartz into charged Certus quartz at the cost of just a little bit of energy. So definitely one of those things that you're going to want to have if it's, within your realms of, I guess, affordability. So let's go ahead and get those ME cables like I mentioned earlier. We'll get a couple of them, and these are just going to be the plain glass cables like I said. Really useful though, and I really like these. You can cover them up, you can break them pretty easily with one of the proper applied energistics wrenches, which I'll make here in a bit. All in all, it's one of those worthwhile things to have around. I really like the cable mechanics in applied energistics. So I don't think I really want to put the charger there because I might try to automate it here at the early stages. So I'm going to scoot it over here. That way I have some space that's not on a corner. That's kind of an odd place to have it anyways. So let's see what I can do about the cabling situation here. Yeah, and so like I said, you're going to want to make a wrench. It's going to save you a lot of time with teardown and disassembly, management, changing of minds, etc. So let's go ahead and make the quartz wrench and combine it with our Morpho tool here. A few accidental clicks later because of the stupid crafting guide, and we'll finally get the recipe right. There we go. So now we can finally remove this dumb cable and route it up the way I want. So we're going to want to just kind of feed it into either the top or the bottom, and you can also hook up a crank to the top if you didn't have AE power yet. If you were trying to make more charged quartz, you can do it this way. So after some time, like I said, your input is Certus quartz and your output is charged Certus quartz. So after some time, it'll convert them around. So let's just automate this at a very primitive level for now. So we'll have an input and an output chest, a couple of item ducts with a couple of servos to input and output stuff. And we're going to set both of them to redstone ignored, and we're going to make sure that the extraction point here knows to whitelist the charged Certus quartz. We don't want the normal Certus quartz getting pulled right back out on accident. So as you can see, input here, it'll take a second, it'll charge it, and then it'll extract, and the next one will go in. So definitely really easy to have this automation early game. You can even do this with hoppers, and it's really useful as far as getting everything kind of started and kickstarting your automation setup with applied energistics. So next up, we're going to want an ME drive. I have no idea what this ME drive fixture is. We might play with it in a future episode, see what it's all about. It looks interesting. But the ME drive is going to require some printed components and a processor, which we haven't really seen anything of yet. So you make these in the Applied Energistics Inscriber, and the Inscriber is relatively affordable. Another one of those flukes crystals, sticky pistons, and some iron, and it's going to take power as well. And it has a few different slots. So you have a slot for different inscriber presses, which you find the normal inscriber presses, the ones that you see in JEI right now, you find those in the big meteors that destroy your world a lot. So you want to find all 4 of them. There's 4 different kinds. You want to find all 4 of them before you even get started, and I happen to already get them all. So you combine the press with the material that goes with it, and it'll give you some printed output. So in this case, we're going to get printed silicon as our output for giving it a silicone press and a piece of silicone. This printed silicone and a few other printed components can be combined to make processors. You can also use this to make name tags. There's these weird, they're not really name tags, they're more like name plates. They're interesting, but you can use them for a couple of other neat things. So let's go ahead and set up a little water pond inside the house. That way I don't have to keep on running outside, and it will just cover it with the trapdoor so that it looks a little bit more natural. I wish there was a way to use the kitchen sink from Cooking for Blockheads for this. I feel like it's a perfect fit. So there's a couple of things that we can do from now. Remember earlier I mentioned the seed and how you have to grow it in water? There's actually this crystal growth chamber from AE2 stuff, a really cool add-on mod, which lets you put them in there instead of having to leave them in a pool of water. And you can make it happen really fast. It's really efficient. I really like these. Don't do it the old-fashioned way that comes with vanilla Applied Energistics. Do it this way. This way is way better if you have AE2 stuff. So I can put these Certus Quartz seeds in, and in like about a minute, they're fully grown. Normally, without any of the crystal growth accelerators, it takes, I think, like an hour and a half. Real lifetime. So we're going to go ahead and get a couple of these inscriber presses and such so that we can get this advanced inscriber. This guy is really cool because it can accept stacks of items for inputs instead of individual items like before. Notice how before I was only able to put one piece of silicone in. This time I can put a stack of silicone in and it'll process them all one at a time. It can still have speed upgrades so it can be accelerated very quickly. And you can lock the slots so that if you wanted to automate this, it's super easy to do so. So let's look into some of those acceleration cards. They're not that expensive. A couple of diamonds, calculation processor, some flukes crystals. Not really a big deal. And definitely worth the accelerator, having the time saved, especially in this tedious early game manual crafting part where we have to run all over the place for each ingredient that we want to use. So once we toss these in here, it's actually amazing how quick this is. The progress bar on this is actually too slow to fully demonstrate how quick it is. It takes about 2 progress bar updates for 1 item to process, which is amazing. So, like I said, this is outstandingly fast. This is faster than you can get the vanilla inscriber to go, not considering the fact that you don't have to deal with item transfer for each individual item. So we'll go ahead and process a whole bunch of these printed circuits for the plain calculation circuits, and kind of get started with some more silicone as well, because there's a lot of stuff that I want to make. I think up next we should work on the controller, though. So looking into the controller, we need some smelted skystone blocks, some pure flukes crystals, and I think it's whichever the diamond processor is. I can never remember them. This controller is cool because it also converts RF to AE power, or it also converts EU to AE power. And the other nice thing is it offers more channels. So remember before I said we had 8 channels? This guy per block can offer a lot more, and the controller is a multi-block. So if I wanted more channels, I could make more of these and put them adjacent to each other, and they share power between them and offer more block faces for me to place cables on, which means more channels. So we're just going to put it here, cover it up with a piece of quartz glass, and then start some cable madness. So pretty fun stuff that we can kind of get started with here. So now that all the wiring's done, let's look into getting some of these applied energistics facades to cover up our cabling, because some places have some cable that's exposed, specifically under the inscriber, or the charger rather. You can really see the cable just popping up out from underneath, and it drives me nuts. So you know what, let's just go ahead and cover it, may as well do it. And like I said, these facades are really useful. They do connect through, so as you see, that facade will make it look like nothing's really different. So we're going to get an ME drive now. So the ME drive is where you store your ME disks, and ME disks, or storage disks, are where you store your physical items in-game as digital items. So let's make a bunch of these storage disks. I'm going to make 10 of the 4Ks. So each one of these holds 63 different types and 4,096 of those types in total. So the max capacity of an individual drive is 4,096 items, or 63 different kinds of items. It's kind of interesting how these work. It's not like it's a straight up conversion, which I'm actually not that offended by. Now, I'm using these smart cables. You'll see these smart cables. As soon as I hook that up, there was a single line that went through it. That represents how many channels that cable is carrying at the point that you see it. So because we hooked up a drive to it, it showed that one channel was being used by showing the single line. So next up, we need to get a couple of things. We need to get an ME storage bus, because right now we have a lot of storage that we can access, but I also want to hook it up to the Yaba barrels that we have here. So let's go ahead and make a Yaba connector. I also want to look into making an ME crafting grid so that I can actually view my items, which I cannot currently. And in order to hook up the Yaba, the drawer or barrel connector to our network, we need an ME storage bus to show it to interface between an external storage item and the network. So this storage bus, we can put it on any side of this here. I'm having a bit of a hard time figuring out how I want to hide this though. So give me a second to see what I can figure out here. And first I guess I would need my axe for that as well. And I want to kind of repaint these two and see if I can repaint or hide stuff. So what about this? Glass barrels? I don't really know how I feel about the look. Part of it's because of the new Minecraft beta texture, which has actually been updated by the time you're watching this. So we'll see if I stick with that. Probably not. So this barrel connector needs to go somewhere that's touching at least one of the barrels on this wall. That's kind of a struggle, but I'm thinking since behind that little log right there is kind of the general vicinity, let's see what I can do about maybe routing a cable up the side here where that log is going to. Because we can cover it up with facades. Now, unfortunately, it's not completely perfect, so I think we're going to have to figure something out for that, but we'll see what we might be able to make do here. So we'll go and put the barrel connector down. You'll see it's showing everything. Plop down the ME storage bus and get a route for this cable to go down, because we just have to kind of get it hooked up and working. So I guess we'll just route it right down here and straight over, I suppose. I don't see any reason why not. First, I have to stop glitching through the world, but whatever. So as you can see, we just kind of route this up and over. Don't worry about how it looks right now, because in a second, I'll show you some magic. So as you can see, these facades cover up the cables just nicely, like I mentioned earlier, and they do have only one side as the only downside. They don't rotate. So these logs on the side are rotated, but the texture for the facade is not. So I'm gonna have to just see about that. I've tried every which way for rotating them, and I can't get any of them to work, so I think they can't be rotated, which is a huge bummer. Nonetheless, we can at least cover up this part here, which is going to look a ton better. We'll make sure to cover up the window part here too. We don't want that to look weird outside. And if we cover up this side, short of the OneProbe's little tooltip saying it's a cable facade instead of saying it's ironwood, you wouldn't even notice. Now let's see what I might be able to do about this, but I think I'm just going to have to give up. Yeah, I give up. So at this point, all we have to do is a couple of other little things here and there. We want to get the rest of this cable hooked up, because at this point, it needs to be, we have the cable coming down, but it's not actually connected to the ME network yet. But we can follow our last cable line and just kind of trace it back for a couple of these little places here and there. And once again, these are smart cables, so they show how many channels they're using. And I prefer the white ones because the color of the cable does actually matter. It dictates what color any of the components, like the terminal, end up being. So this ME terminal has a normal kind of fluixy color. As you can see, it's that weird purplish color. But when it's attached to a white cable, it will be white. I think right here in the center on this post would be an amazing place to put it. It's right in the center of the house. You see it right when you walk in. It's really just an easy to access place. So like I said, you place it down on a white cable and it's white. And we can cover up the sides and the front of it. So it's going to look like there's a terminal built right into the log that is holding up the stairs. And I think that's a really nice look, really easily accessed, like I said. So we just walk up, we click on it, and as soon as it's connected, you'll see our entire inventory right there. As soon as we walk into the house, we don't have to go rummaging around trying to find some shortcut. So let's route some smart cables over here as well after I get unstuck. I'm a little bit in a pickle here. Help. Okay, there we go. So we can go ahead and finish covering this stuff up here. And boom! All of our Yaba barrel contents are visible. And once we get the ME storage drives in, we should also be able to, which they are already in, but since they're already in there, we can go ahead and do a few things with them. But first, I want to set the priority of the barrels to be very high. 2048 should work. That way, the ME network is going to try to insert into the barrels first. And if it can't, which if it doesn't have a barrel for it already, it won't be able to. If it can't, then it's going to go into the drive instead, which is very nice. So I'm going to change the search box mode to JEI synchronized auto, which means when I open it, it'll be auto selected, and anything I type in the terminal search bar will go to JEI search bar as well. Sorting kills me. I liked JEI because I liked refined storage because sorting for refined storage had an ID option, which I like because it sorts things basically by Minecraft first and then other mods later. But there's no real option for that here in Applied Energistics. So this stretch of the montage here is me just running back and forth from the chests back down to the network, from the chests back down to the network, converting everything to a digital form. That way it's much easier for us to access them all in one place. So basically I use the not enough wands moving wand to move all of the barrels and the item barrels from actual additions down here. And that should pretty much get everything processed and moved over. So I'm going to let this little montage roll while the rest of the stuff happens, and see you in a bit. So there we go. Now that all the inventories are cleaned up and everything's put where it belongs, I've got one chest or one barrel over here that I'm keeping all of my non-stacking items in. The reason I'm doing this is because, like I said, these 4K ME drives store 63 types. So if I put all 63 types in them and each item only stacks once, depending on how they work out, I could fill up a drive with just a bunch of random tools, which is dumb. So instead, I'm going to do that instead and have them all in a separate chest. One last thing before I go, I want to make one of these reservoirs because I keep running into those redstone clathrates underground whenever I go mining. And while they're really useful, the resonant redstone liquid is kind of a pain in the bum. So I'm going to make one of these. That way I can pick up the liquid and keep it for later. So they're basically a tank and a bucket combined into one item. So we'll go ahead and make the second tier. I don't think I'm going to bother with the third tier. It's not really worth it yet. But yeah, so I think this is kind of coming up to a good point where I can wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. And if you didn't know, I'm switching over to a bi-monthly, like twice a month routine. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.